Hello again. I don't think that I need to make any secret of the fact that I'm an English patriot. I take pride in the country of my birth and believe it to be a damn sight better than any other nation that exists now or has indeed existed in the past. This is called patriotism, and it has fallen rather from favour in this country over the last few decades. The root of this decline in patriotism is an alien ideology known as cultural relativism. I spoke a few days of Franz Boas and Ruth Benedict, who devised and propagated this pernicious doctrine. Their idea was that the ways of cannibals in Papua New Guinea may be seen as just as important or valid, to use a modern expression, as the long traditions of democracy and equality under the law which have arisen in our own country. In short, just because we are not in the habit of murdering our neighbours and cooking them for dinner, that does not mean that we should assume that this is a bad way of carrying on. We should be careful not to make any so-called value judgments about such behaviour. Most of us feel instinctively, of course, that this is sheer nonsense, and that it is far better to settle any differences with our neighbour in the county court than by spearing him and bringing him home for our family to eat. Cultural relativism thus falls at the first hurdle, despite what many intellectuals may try to prove to the contrary. In the same way, the British religious customs of singing hymns during a school assembly, reading the Bible and sometimes attending chapel or church on Sunday mornings is certainly preferable to chopping people's hands off, stoning women to death, or blowing ourselves up on tube trains. The one form of religion is plainly better than the other. We have, though, now been so thoroughly brainwashed and indoctrinated in a lot of highfalutin nonsense that even saying such an obvious thing out loud is to risk being condemned as a racist or being Islamophobic. I will say it again. Some ways of ordering society are better than others, and over the centuries Britain gradually developed ways of doing things which are far better than those in other countries. I am happy for foreigners to conduct themselves as they please, and when I go abroad I have the courtesy to abide by the local customs. I refrain from alcohol in Muslim countries, remove my shoes when expected, cover my head on other occasions, but privately I see such things as pointless and silly. I believe that the way of life in Britain is vastly superior to that of any foreign country. The difficulty is, though, that this way of life is now under siege, and in effect the foreign countries have now come to my country and demand that I respect their ways even in my own country. This is another matter entirely, and I have no intention of doing so, or at least feeling obliged to do so. This is my country, and if people don't like the way that things are done here, they can jolly well go somewhere else which suits them better. I do not wish to sound at all xenophobic, but it does seem to me that there is a difference between guests and the master of the house. As an Englishman, I am master of the house. This is, after all, my country and that of my forefathers. If people seek refuge here, then they must abide by the rules that I value, and not try and turn the place into something like the countries from which they have apparently fled. It does rather look to me that, having invited Johnny Foreigner to stay for a while, he has now got his feet under the table and is trying to dictate to us how we do things in our own homes. It is time that this stopped. Cultural relativism is a scourge, and our children and young people are now being taught its perspective at school. This is why the very word judge has become negative. People say things like, "you mustn't judge," or talk of feeling that they are being judged. Judging and comparing things, even ways of life, is now seen as being undesirable and bigoted, but it's nothing of the kind. I certainly judge nations and individual people by British standards. And when I see a bloody dictatorship where people are locked up without trial or massacred in the streets, then I don't hesitate to say that that is a bad country. When I observe individuals in this country who live by the knife and gun, turning neighbourhoods into miniature versions of various third world countries, I say that this behaviour is undesirable and wrong. I don't think we will any of us go far wrong if we spend a little more time judging by the old standards of Britain, whether it comes to queuing for buses or gang warfare on the streets, from speaking fluent English to living quietly without disturbing one's neighbours. I expect people living in Britain to abide by British standards, and I greatly dislike it if they fail to do so.